find something that is going to feed your soul.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
This week's Island Influencers conversation is rich with insight and a heartfelt warmth that will undoubtedly resonate. I welcome Andrea Chambers, Chief Executive Officer at I'll Listen and Minds Matter. Andrea, a proud Manx native, shares her journey from nursing, including her time in the special care baby unit. We'll also explore her transition to full-time motherhood and the path that ultimately led to her pivotal career at I'll Listen, an organisation dedicated to supporting mental health. She also discusses the impact of COVID-19 on mental health referrals and offers insights into her interests and inspirations. Here's my conversation with Andrea Chambers in episode 105 of Island Influencers. Welcome, Andrea Chambers.
Thank you very much.
To the Island Influencers studio. Thank you so much for coming out to the studio. And it's a pleasure to meet you at last. I've heard a lot about I'll Listen, particularly since COVID and seen the rise in the service offered, and so I thought it would be wonderful to meet you, and thanks so much for agreeing to come on the programme.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, and it's always interesting for me to talk about I'll Listen. As you say, we've had an incredibly interesting journey over the last few years, much different than what we thought it would be.
Yeah.
But immensely rewarding and hoping that we're going in the right direction.
Great. Well, I wonder if you'd mind telling our listeners all about you. Let's just have a background of who is Andrea Chambers and, what drives you.
Yeah, I was born on the Isle of Man in Ramsey, and my family are Manx on both sides, so I've always lived here. I'm one of 6 children, and we all live on the island actually, which is, I suppose, really unusual in a family these days.
I'd say
they're
so.
not flung across the world. We're all here, and we all live within half an hour of my mum, so it must be quite nice for her, I guess, when we all get together, and it's certainly nice for all of us to regularly meet up and keep up with each other and our respective children.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. So where did you go to Ramsey Grammar?
No, I didn't. I went to Albert Road School, and then we left. My dad was an architect, and we left for his job and moved to Douglas when I was about 12. So then I did 1 term at Murray's Road, and then I went to Ballacameen for the last year that it was an all-girls school. So yeah, that's quite a long time ago now.
Gosh, yeah. So that was Park Road School, was it?
It was Ballacameen, and then,
right,
then we went to St Ninian's. Yeah, it was. They were good days, and I've been back to Ballacameen a bit lately with I'll Listen, and same building, very different interior.
Right, yeah, I'm sure it is. Oh, great. So when you left school, what happened then?
I left school and went to train at Nobles as a nurse, so I did cadet nursing for a year, and then did my 3 years in those days. State registered nurse, now registered nurse training. When I qualified, I worked with on the male surgical ward, which I absolutely loved, with a great team of people there. And there's so much of that, what I learned in those days, stays with me now. And then I moved to work in the special care baby unit at the Jane Crookall for a couple of years, which was lovely. A great job that I found it much more difficult to do once I had my own children.
I'm sure.
You sort of identify with the very difficult journey that some of those parents are going through. But it was a great job, and I loved it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that must be quite challenging dealing with newborns that are very early.
Well, in those days, I sound like I'm 100. The treatments were fewer, it was a science that was growing, and very often there wasn't that much that we could do for little ones who were born very early. Although there's several I see around still now who were born tiny and who did remarkably well, and it's amazing to see how they've come on with their lives. And
how the technology's moved on too.
It's incredible now.
Yeah. Gosh. Yeah. Wow. So did you carry on working when you had your children, or were you able to work a bit at the same time?
So my husband was a policeman, and I was a nurse, so the shift work was difficult for both of us.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so
I can't really imagine. I can't imagine it. No.
So when we had our children, I was, and I will be forever grateful for the fact that I was able to stay at home with them. For 12 years, I didn't work. Again, 4 children is quite an undertaking, and it was a blessing for me to be able to spend that time with them. And again, that's a really personal choice that I chose to take that career break, and I've been lucky enough to pick up a really successful career since.
Yes, haven't you? So how did that come about?
Well, when my youngest, Oliver, was well established at school, I thought, right, okay, I need to do more with my life now. Do I want to go back to nursing? And I decided that I didn't at that stage, but that training has stood me in good stead for whatever I wanted to do moving forward. So it was a career that I loved with a passion, but I needed to do something different. So I just saw in the paper one week an advert for a job at Manx Cancer Help, and they were looking for somebody part-time to work with patients and their families who were living with a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, sure. So give that a date stamp. When was that?
That was, I'm really bad at date stamps, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Is that what I've written down?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, about 15 years ago. So I went along for an interview for that job, and I thought something like 42 people applied.
Good grief.
Because they were offering to train you as a counsellor. And at that time, it was just, people were just really realising, I think, how important mental health and well-being is.
That was really forward thinking, back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And Eve Berridge, who started Manx Cancer Help, and it's the 40th anniversary of the beginning of that charity this year.
That started out as the Lisa Lowe.
That's right.
Charity, didn't it? Yeah, I worked with Lisa at Barclays.
Did you? And so many people still say that.
Yeah,
she was a real character. Apparently,
she was a character.
I didn't ever know her.
She was a thoroughly nice person.
Yeah. Taken far too early.
Yes.
And I think the work that I did there, so I was lucky enough to get the job, and within a few weeks of working alongside Eve, who was just coming up to retirement, I thought, gosh, this is a changing world in mental health, and this is a charity with so much potential. And so very quickly I was working full time and absolutely loving it. I found my passion in life, and anyone that's lucky enough to be able to do that knows how that drives you forward. Yeah, so working with families who were impacted by cancer is really rewarding work. And again, the stories of those people have impacted my life forever. They're incredibly, I was going to use the word brave, but that's not a word that people like to have used, because they don't choose that journey. It's a journey that is thrust upon them, but nearly without exception, people adopt this different way of being. And often if you speak to somebody who's been through the cancer journey, at the end of it, they'll say, it's changed me so much for the better. And I'm a different person, and I will live my life in a different way because of it. Of course, not all of those people are lucky enough to come through the other side of it.
No, I'm sure.
And working with people who are at the end of their lives is very challenging, but also rewarding. And sort of coming full circle, we've just moved part of our listen into the hospice building, the Shoal Wellbeing Centre at Hospice. And again, although they're dealing with people who are sadly at the end of their lives, it's a really uplifting and lovely environment. And that's kind of how people choose to deal with it. So that was a really interesting part of my life. And we looked at the changing world of psychology and realised that the sort of really useful listening service that we were providing as Manx Cancer Help was no longer what people needed. That some people, when they are faced with cancer, they've also got depression or other illnesses, or they get depression as a result of it.
Yeah, it's unsurprising.
Yeah, about 20%, I think, is the statistic around that. People that need real support. So we set up then the island's psycho-oncology service, which is psychology around cancer. And we've been doing that ever since and still are.
It's very specialist for such a small island.
It is. It's very specialist service, and we've, for instance, ladies who choose to have a prophylactic mastectomy, so have bilateral mastectomies, to prevent them getting cancer or lessen the chances of them getting cancer if they know that they're genetically predisposed to it. They need to have a very in-depth psychological assessment to try to ensure that they can cope with that radical surgery. So we've been doing that on island for years. And we have our clinical lead, who is Professor Robin Davidson, who is based in Belfast and is very well known in psycho-oncology circles and clinical psychology broadly. And he's been our clinical lead and worked with me for the last 15 years. So we're very proud of that service. But about 5 years ago, we had a new board of directors and we looked at, what do we do with this charity now? Do we continue doing the work that we're doing with cancer patients and stay quite small? Or do we actually use the skills and the governance and everything we've acquired around that and use it in different areas? So that's where one of our, we used to have lovely open days and people came in and chatted about how they were feeling. And one of our volunteers there said, there are so many families who are impacted by the really long waiting lists for our overwhelmed CAM service on island. And isn't there something we could do around that?
Yeah. So the CAM service, for the benefit of our listeners,
is child and adolescent mental health services.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's fairly well publicised on island that they have huge waiting lists through the fact that they are just overwhelmed by the number of young people who now need psychological support. So I can always remember sitting with my board of directors and saying, look, I've had this idea and maybe we think we can do this. We've got the expertise. We had a brilliant therapist, our senior therapist then, Adrian, who has worked with children a lot during his career. And they gave us the go-ahead to try and make this happen.
Because if I'm right by what I've read, this particular charity is self-funded?
Yeah, so our Listen, we are funded. Our first pilot year was funded by the Scheinberg family, which was very generous of them, and they could see one of the things that they like to fund is children's services. So they were very generous and said, we worked with 2 schools on island, one being King William's College, who also paid us for the service, and one being QE2. And we're forever grateful to those 2 secondary schools who allowed us to go in and build, alongside the teachers, build the Our Listen model. And about 4 months into that, we were approached by an on-island representative of the Z Zurich Foundation. She worked for Zurich, but knew what the foundation were doing, and they do great work across the world, in fact.
Yes.
But on island, they fund a number of different things like junior achievement and some brilliant stuff that goes on around young people.
We've seen it, mountain biking at Archalagan. They did those trails, didn't it? Stuff like that. Yeah, so it's very wide. Yeah,
it is.
Okay.
So the foundation came to us and said, would you like to work with us towards some funding? And I thought, well, that would be lovely. That might cover somebody's salary. So we did, and I sat down for an afternoon and put down on the back of a piece of paper, really, what we thought Our Listen could potentially grow into. And we were very lucky, after 18 months of working with them on a proposal, to get £1.875 million of funding over 3 years.
That's astonishing.
To develop Our Listen services. And that's why Our Listen exists today. And that funding has just come to an end in July. So government funding wise, no, we don't have any, but we are working towards it. We do have a great relationship with government, with education and with health. Our Listen is a crossover service that works with both.
Sure does, yeah.
So it's been a journey that's taken a bit longer than we thought to get some substantive government funding. That means that we don't have to suddenly remove this amazing service that's helping so many young people.
So that manages to cover Manx cancer care. Manx Cancer Help.
Manx Cancer Help.
Yeah.
So when we set up our Listen, which is a trading name of MCH Psychological Services, which was Manx Cancer Help.
Right, okay.
Because Manx Cancer Help was no longer relevant because we were dealing also with people with other long-term conditions as well. So that side of the charity is now called Minds Matter. And so we have MCH as the parent charity and two trading names, one being Our Listen and one being Minds Matter.
Ah, okay. So, well, thank you for clarifying that, because you see different names pop up, and if you don't know,
absolutely,
you don't know. So
absolutely.
Right.
So our Minds Matter has been sort of sitting quietly in the background for 3 or 4 years because Our Listen has, partly because of COVID, there was no mention of COVID in the world when we set up Our Listen. Crazy. Yeah.
Coincidental.
Yeah. It was, I guess. And
fortunate
for
the Isle of Man, in any case.
And looking back, we often think as a team, what would Our Listen have looked like if COVID hadn't happened? Because it was very early in what we were doing, and the whole idea of Our Listen is that we start in primary schools and we go in, and we have an amazing team of people. Our team has grown from 8 to 35, and we have the most incredible people. If you work for a charity, you're driven by real passion for the work you do. And we ask, well, I say we ask an awful lot of our people. I don't mean that we're slave drivers, but we do. It's very emotive work and can be quite difficult. And I'm constantly in awe of the young people that go into schools and sit with young people and listen to the very difficult times they're going through in their lives and try and give them coping strategies to deal with that. So that's part of the work that we do, and should be started in primary schools. It's meant to be early intervention because we all have mental health. Every single one of us has mental health, and we all have days where we can cope with it and days where we can't. And so when we hear Our Listen talked about as a mental health charity, I think that gives a perception to people that we're dealing with young people who are seriously mentally ill. And at one end of the scale at this moment, we are. But the whole premise of Our Listen is that we deal with everybody, that we talk to every single young person in education and help them to realise that to be frightened, to be nervous, to be worried about exams and worried about going to your first ballet lesson and all those things that life throws at us is perfectly normal, and that most of us will learn to cope with the difficulties of life.
Yeah, eventually. It's a lifelong learning process, I guess.
It is.
So do you get to go and work at the schools by training the teachers to also perhaps get involved in more of these sort of coaching?
Yeah, so that has developed as part of the service, that we, in primary schools, we now have 2 wellbeing facilitators who go out and do assemblies and talk to young people. In secondary schools, we have facilitator as well who will go out and talk to the more difficult stresses that you have when you're going through secondary school. And we also have a one-to-one listening service. So we have a full-time worker in every secondary school who takes one-to-one referrals. Also meant to be low level, but the stresses that people are going through at the moment means that some of these are quite complex young people. Working with the teachers is key, and the Our Listen model has been developed very much in conjunction with the separate schools. Again, it's been a learning curve. And I think probably at first teachers and staff were a little bit wary of, who are these people coming in and doing this work. But now they are so welcoming to our guys across the schools, and we do provide training for teachers, and we need to do more of that. We hope to do more of that moving forward, because we can't expect our teachers who are trained to teach to also be able to cope with mental health.
And is this a model that is followed in the UK, or is this Isle of Man invented and led?
Partly. So there are some amazing organisations in the UK doing this work. So Mind being one charity that does some bits and pieces around mental health. Bits and pieces, that makes it sound very trivial, and it's a hugely successful charity.
Yes.
Place to Be is a charity.
But there's nothing mainstream across
across every school.
I suppose it's the beauty of the island being so small. Yeah.
That is the huge benefit of living on an island, that we can and we should be doing this better than anywhere else. That's been a challenge. That is why our Listen is a work in progress, because COVID has caused problems.
I'm sure. Yes, I was going to ask about that. I imagine there was an explosion in identification of mental health issues from people being locked up for weeks.
Yeah, for families and young people, we can't just deal with the young person, because every young person has a family, and COVID meant that young people became isolated, that friction in houses was different and relationships were different. Going back to school and clubs and all of their socialising changed.
Yes, anyone with kids, I guess, we've all seen it, yeah.
Yeah, it was a tough time, and I think the estimate is that we'll be dealing with that for at least the next 5 years. And we're certainly seeing it in referrals to our Listen. A big increase, yeah, a lot. We're having, the summer holidays are different, although we do, for this year, for the first time, we've had young people continuing their sessions throughout the holidays, which has been very beneficial to them and to us, I think. And we have sometimes 40 referrals a week across the schools, and also our level 2 therapeutic service. So we have 10 counsellors who we employ, who work now in the Shoal Wellbeing Centre at Hospice. This is their 3rd week. And they take the more complex referrals, because the wellbeing practitioners in schools are not qualified counsellors, although they do have a counselling qualification, or are working towards it, and are very closely supervised and overseen. We have a full-time social worker who, because safeguarding is paramount when working with young people, and those who need a little bit more come to our service and see one of our qualified therapists. It's very difficult to explain the breadth of the service, because it's growing.
Well, yes. I mean, we had a training session here with our Listen, about a year ago, probably. Gareth Nicholson, one of your trainers, came out. Excellent. We had a really good session. Is that something you're still offering? That sort of service?
So that's that part of the service is now called Wellbeing Solutions, and is growing all the time. And they are just launching an employee counselling service, and also a number of different offerings from that team of 3 people, Natalie, Gareth and Rebecca, who are just, brilliant people and so passionate about the work they're doing. Gareth, as you say, he started with us. Everyone knows Gareth from the Bar George days. And then he came to work with us as a fundraiser. And then he's changed over time, and is incredibly passionate trainer on everything mental health.
No, we all benefited greatly from that course.
Good.
So anyone who's listening with a company who wants to learn about this or give their staff this sort of training, we couldn't recommend it more highly, really.
Good. I think it's something that, probably as a result of COVID, that employers are judged by potential employees on how you take care of the well-being of your staff, and that's something that we're offering. Is we can come in and do an audit of your workplace well-being culture and offer tips on show ways of making it easier to support people, because we all have our troubles in our lives and they come with us to work, and so supporting your staff is hugely important.
Yes, they just come with us. That's it.
They do.
Yeah. Yes. No. Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to something I know a little bit more about with the questions in the podcast, but we deal a lot here with financial well-being. That's kind of a cornerstone of financial planning. So, and it's going to be funny to ask you this, because we believe that psychologically our behaviours around money are shaped from a very early age, typically with how our parents are and then how their beliefs transfer onto us and then how we take them forward into adult life. And of course we know that money causes as many issues as it solves. So what are your earliest memories of money?
My earliest memories of money would be, I suppose, getting pocket money every week, and we all look forward to that and then think what you're going to spend it on. And then I had...
So you were one of 6, right?
One of 6.
So where did you lie in that sort of order? Were you the eldest?
I'm second eldest.
Second eldest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So there were four of us, and then a small gap, and then my 2 younger brothers. So they probably felt as if they had more parents, but yeah, it's lovely, and we all remain close. But money wise,
that's really nice.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that, and it's something that I've tried to pass on to my children. I got a Saturday job in playground toy shop at a very young age, and I think that it's work ethic that I think is something that I've passed on to my children, is find a job that you love and then you get paid for it, and we need to be able to do that. That's what makes the world go around. And
so important.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it really is, and I see it in all of my children, and I think that's one of the things that I'm very proud that I've passed on to them. They started their working life, nearly all of them, here in Tinwood Mills, in the coffee shop with the very lovely Kathy Foley, who taught them that if you've got a job, you need to be here on time and you need to do it properly and you need to be accountable to your colleagues. And I think those are huge lessons.
Dealing with the general public.
One of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Money's one of those lessons.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really, really good. So of all the things you've done in your life so far, what's given you the most fulfillment, would you say? I mean, you can, from a personal, obviously, but also from a work perspective.
I think work, because my career has my real passion, which is the mental health side of things, is a work in progress. So it gives me great satisfaction every day. And that's something that I'm very proud of. My real fulfillment in life, I've mentioned them many times, is my children. They're amazing. It's amazing bringing young people up, but to live and socialise and see the adults is quite incredible experience.
Yes, I feel it too. It's a real privilege.
It really is to look at these young people and what they're doing with their lives, and they're now wives and partners and children. I've got 3 grandchildren. They give me pleasure every day, and that sort of fight for the work around mental health that I'm doing is very much rooted in making the world a better place for them to grow up in.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? Thank you. So for any existing business owner or community leader, organisational leader that you are, what would be your number one tip to any aspiring person who wants to take on this sort of role?
Leadership roles, it was never something that I aspired to do, and the growth of our Listen has completely changed my role from being a small family little team to being quite a big team, and that has not come without its challenges, and it challenges us every day to try and get it right. I think learning from your people, listening to everybody, never ever thinking that I'm the expert in this particular field, because I'm not, and relying on the judgment and expertise of those who are, and remember why we're doing the job and the people that we're doing it for. It's very easy to get bogged down in politics and all the difficulties of what we're doing, but I only have to go and spend a day, as I did last week, sitting at reception and see the young people coming in and the difference we're making to lives, and that's what drives me forward. And I guess that's my advice to anybody. Find something that is going to feed your soul.
Such wisdom in that, thanks. And what do you do to relax when you're not doing this?
I I was going to say I cook, but if my family are listening to this, they will say, no, you don't. You stand there while we cook. So I have a daughter and a son. Both my sons that really enjoy cooking. So on a Sunday, we all like to get together and cook, and that's lovely. And I'm the sous chef these days. Although I can cook, they are better than me.
Oh, that sounds like a wonderful solution.
So it's great. I have a dog, so I love to walk. I love the Isle of Man. I love the beaches.
Favourite walk?
Favourite walk is, I live in the south, but even before then, I love Bradderhead.
Yeah, it's a good challenging stroll.
It is, and Glenmore Beach is a favourite for the family, I think, and the dogs. So yeah, I just love to get out and about in the countryside. That's good mindfulness, isn't it?
Yeah, sure is. Thank you. So what's the best things about living on the island? Being able to do that?
Being able to do that. It has its challenges. I think when you have children and your son will be coming up to that, do I go to university? And if they go to university, do they come back? I'm lucky in that 3 of mine are now back on island, but my daughter and my grandchildren are in Cardiff. So it does bring its challenges. And I miss them every day, but they have their lives and they have to live there. And we still manage to be close. My son and his wife, they're both lawyers and they've just relocated back here, in about 4 or 5 months ago. So that was lovely. And unusually, I think probably
it is.
My daughter is head of services at I'll Listen. So that's an unusual pairing, I think, in the mother and daughter actually work full time together.
And get on.
For the most part, yeah. We do, but the passion that I have for my work, she continues with knobs on. Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. So what would you say then are the main challenges that the Isle of Man faces?
I think, I think I made mention of it before, and you hear it in every aspect of the island life. We should be the experts in everything. We should be able to do everything to a gold standard level and above. We have the ingredients, I think, to do that. We're a brilliant test bed as a community.
Yeah, aren't we just?
Yeah, we are. And certainly with mental health models, we'd love to do a lot of research around how we can actually make life easier for people. And that's something that is very much in the future for our Listen. Economically, it's hugely challenging times, isn't it? And of course,
yeah, it is.
Mental health is my thing, and that everything we do impacts on our mental health. I wouldn't like the job of a politician. I'm sure they need a lot of counselling support at times. It must be really difficult. It's a challenge. It's very challenging times, but I think we need to hang on to the beauty of where we live and trying to make it a place where people want to be and want to bring their children up and young people want to return to. And the infrastructure needs to be able to support that. And that's a very long conversation about how we could improve that.
Isn't it? But I think what you're doing, personally, having listened to you today, I think you're certainly helping a long way to going towards making that the place where people do want to come and live.
Yeah, I think that's something that families look at. Is there a good education system? My son works in education, so I have family members all over the place.
Don't we all?
And so, but that's the good side, but it's also a downside. Families do look into, is the education, is the health system right? Do we look after our employees? So they're all things that we could and should be an outstanding beacon that calls people in.
Thanks. So what solutions can you see?
Solutions, I think, if we want to attract more people to come and live here, then we need to make the offering more attractive. And that needs to be health and well-being. That's one of the first things people look at. We always know that if we choose to live on an island and if we're seriously ill, we're going to have to go off island for expertise. And that's something that Manx Care is working hard, I think, to make a reality. We can't offer cutting edge surgeries here, but we need to have accessible and affordable and supportive access to expertise off island. That's a challenge. And the Channel Islands are all have similar challenges,
I'm sure,
and are all trying to deal with them in different ways. And I think, are working with those other island jurisdictions is very important to see how we can capitalise and get people here.
Yeah, I hear that they do that in certain areas already. It's quite interesting, and it seems very advantageous to have close relationships with others who are in a similar position and share good practice.
Absolutely. In my Manx Cancer Help days, I was a governor of Clatterbridge, and most of our people go off island for their cancer treatment to Clatterbridge, which is a real centre of excellence. And these are relationships that we need to be building on and using the expertise to. But it is difficult if you're poorly and you have to get on a plane and go away for your treatment for the day. That's hugely challenging. But the answers to that, I'm not sure what they are.
Thank you for being so honest. What have you got planned next for our listen? You did mention before about certain ideas that were coming. Is there anything you can mention at this point?
Yeah, so we are hoping to work much more closely with the Department of Education over the coming months. They have seen a real rise in young people, the young people who are sitting on the CAMHS waiting list, and some of them have been there for 2 or 3 years, and CAMHS are working really hard to change that. And so that this isn't a criticism of them, it's a fact that, those young people are there, they're ringing our listen every day, but they're also going to school every day. So the teachers have to find a way of working with those young people. That's something that we're trying to work collaboratively with both of those departments to really bring a different way of dealing with young people. At the moment, every young person that needs any sort of mental health support, whether that's just a little bit of tweaking of the way of your coping mechanisms or really high level stuff, they all referred to CAMHS, which is why CAMHS is overwhelmed. So there will hopefully be a model that will change that. Manx Care are looking to commission that work, and I'll Listen will just be one agency that will hopefully bid for that piece of work. So as much as our plans for our charitable offerings are there, and that will be the work in schools with primary schools, the higher level work, we will have to go through the commissioning process. And we understand that, and we're more than ready for that.
Yeah, sounds like it. So, just there's the last few fun questions, if you don't mind. But any books or podcasts that you listen to, sources of inspiration that you really want to share with our listeners?
I'm a bit of an avid reader. I do like a podcast, very Zestology. I like that's a good one for general well-being. Books. I'm terrible to have books on my Kindle, and so I read them and think,
I do.
I don't know who wrote that. But one I've read recently was by Lisa Jewell and called Family in the Attic. That's really good.
Oh, okay.
And Michelle Obama's book called
Becoming, is it?
No.
Oh.
I can't think. It's something about the light in my life, or the light. Anyway,
we'll put it in the show notes.
It's very good. That's a very good book.
Yes.
I love to read. That's a good relaxation.
Oh, okay. And who inspires you?
I think probably that would go back to some of the people I've worked alongside over the years, who I have seen achieve amazing things whilst dealing with really, really poor health.
Okay, so what's your favourite quote?
Oh gosh! Now, if the guys at work listen to this, they will laugh because I love an uplifting quote. But the one that seems to strike a chord with me lately, and I do have on my office wall, is "Life is a long lesson in humility."
So that's a very good one. No one's come up with that one yet, but that's a really nice one.
Yeah,
actually,
he was a fascinating man.
Well, I don't know very much about him, honestly.
Fascinating.
Didn't he write Peter Pan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a result of quite a difficult childhood.
Oh.
Yeah. So, so that's a quote that I feel transfers well into my life.
Yeah. So where can we go? Where can our listeners go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing with I'll Listen and Mind Matters?
So Minds Matter you'll be seeing making a comeback over the next few months, because we're going to be offering cancer services from the new cancer centre that's going to be built in the ground of Nobles Hospital. We have, I'll Listen has a website, oullisten.com, and
it's a great name, by the way.
I'll Listen. Yeah. Again, that was one of our volunteers. When we were sat around thinking, what can we call this charity?
Well done, that person.
Yeah, Alison, her name was. It is a great name, and anyone who needs to know about I'll Listen is very welcome to just give us a call on 679-118 if you need any help or support, and talk to one of our team.
Well, we'll put all those details in the show notes so that any listener can click on the link and
thank you,
connect through. Well, apart from thanking you so much, it has been a real pleasure learning all about I'll Listen and you today.
Thank you.
The Isle of Man is so lucky to have the service, and thank you.
Thank you. No, it's a pleasure. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening this far. I hope you found this episode to be valuable. If so, I'd like to ask you for a small favour. Would you please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, because that's one of the best ways for others to find the series, and please send a link to the podcast to 3 friends or colleagues who know they'll find it helpful. That way, we can spread the word about how great a place the Isle of Man is to live and work, and help spread some positivity. Thanks again for tuning in and being part of our great community. I'll see you next time. Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer Catherine Watts from Social Cues and editor Martin Bamford at Bear Content, and thank you for listening.